doing, guys? Just gonna get things started again here on the Eastern Front in the Civil War. So we're gonna be back in the Virginia area. I guess you know that map well, but I'll be talking about the map a lot, really, on this. We're gonna look at the Battle of Chancellorsville in May of 1863. So what you should probably do is get to page 8 of your essential questions. It's the big packety kind of thing that I put up on Classroom for you guys. Page 8, so if you got to pause me and get there, so be it. It's got this kind of tough looking guy at the top left corner here with the like goatee beard kind of thing. Anyway, who is this guy? That's Nathan Bedford Forrest. He's a Confederate cavalry commander. He's a real wily character. The Union can never really catch him. He does a lot of damage to the Union side. As a cavalry officer, he frequently operates behind enemy lines, takes out their supply trains, disrupts things, basically messes a lot of things up with as few people as possible. And then, I guess maybe even he's better known, after the Civil War was over, he founded the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. So he was still kind of active in those kind of politics even after the war. They never caught him, they never killed him. But remember, all this is on page 8, so make sure you get to page 8. All right, so first we'll look at a little bit of a map orientation here. This is Virginia over here. And so here's those three sort of like fingers almost that stick out into the Chesapeake Bay on the eastern coast of Virginia. And Fredericksburg is this sort of pink dot right here. So if you remember, Fredericksburg was an absolute disaster of a battle for the Union Army. It was led by General Ambrose Burnside. Yes, that's where we get the name sideburns for people who have like the big, the big lamb chops or whatever growing down the side of their face, because that was a style that he had obviously embraced if you ever see a picture of him. But General Ambrose Burnside for the Union led the attack here at Fredericksburg in December of 1862. Absolute disaster. He had to cross the Rappahannock River, and then he attacks through this town and has his guys charge up a hill at the Confederate lines. The Confederates are all dug in, they're all behind walls and stuff like that. And he just got tens of thousands of Union soldiers just completely cut to pieces in a useless loss of a battle. So that's Fredericksburg right here at this dot. Now, if you can see, I got this sort of like bluish line, and I'm simplifying the map a lot. There's a lot of rivers and waterways and things in Virginia. It's a very watery kind of state, but this is the Rappahannock River, and we'll look at that a little bit later. But the green dot you see, also just south of the Rappahannock River, a little further inland, this is Chancellorsville. And we're gonna look at Chancellorsville. Again, that's on page 8. So we'll look at Chancellorsville, and then the wider map, it's out west. Here's West Virginia. Washington, D.C.'s up here. Richmond, I just designated with an R right there. Okay, so moving over to this map, this is the sort of wider map or more specific map of Chancellorsville. Not a lot of water around Chancellorsville. There's this Rappahannock River sort of on the north edge of the battlefield, but there wasn't really a whole lot of action up here. If you look at page 8 on the notes, it says U.S. General Joe Hooker moved west along the Rappahannock River to outflank Confederate positions in Fredericksburg. He was met by the Confederates. Okay, so yeah, there's no getting through Fredericksburg. That's pretty much been determined already. And you hear a new name, General Joe Hooker. So obviously something happened with the chain of command for the Union side. Pretty obvious, but Burnside got fired. I mean, he just wasted tens of thousands of guys in this ridiculous battle. So he was fired and replaced by Joe Hooker, called Fightin' Joe Hooker by the newspapers. And he's an aggressive guy. He's looking to prove himself against Lee, and he's not going to be a sit back and take it sort of general. So people like Lincoln like that about him. They think that this is going to be our guy, so they put Joe Hooker in charge. So Joe Hooker's going to come, since he can't go through here, he's going to flank around out west and try and cross the river and come down on Richmond out west. By doing that, you're going to force General Lee, to come out of his fortified positions at Fredericksburg and fight in the open. So now it's supposed to be, at least in Hooker's mind, more of a fair fight. That's what he's going for. So once we get back to our more detailed map of the Chancellorsville area, you can see there's the convergence of a bunch of roads around here. Not much in the way of railroads, not much in the way of rivers. There's a river up there. It's got my 1 mile scale approximately, because I just hand drew it, and I've got my north facing arrow right there. So Hooker comes out, he's looking to fight, and he wants to draw Lee out. On the first day, May 1st, there are some battles in this vicinity right here, sort of at the confluence of these two roads, the Orange Turnpike and the Plank Road. So just write May 1 in there. May 1st, and you've got Union designated with blue in here, and you've got Confederates designated with red attacking inwards, like so. So here's your red Confederates attacking in, and on May 1st, it's not the hugest part of the battle. They basically pushed the Union guys out on May 1st, and I think Hooker was maybe okay with that, because remember, his main thing is he wants to get the Confederates to come out and fight. So he lets his guys fall back, and they end up sort of like around here. And he's got some units out this way too. So he sets himself up, and he's kind of sitting back like, all right, come and get me. Now what Lee did, Lee left part of his army here at Fredericksburg, my little pink dot. He left part of his army at Fredericksburg, took the rest out, and goes after Hooker in this vicinity of this Chancellorsville. He doesn't know there's going to be a battle at Chancellorsville. That's just the way it works out. So he divided his army. You're not really supposed to do that. The rule book says don't do that. Don't divide your army in the face of the enemy. Lee recognized that the rule book is a guideline. He's like, well, we're going to divide. We got to. So he leaves a few guys on defense at Fredericksburg, comes out to fight over here. So after this initial May 1st battle, the Confederates kind of set up, and Lee guesses correctly that Hooker is just sort of sitting back here in this Chancellorsville area, and he's all set up on defense, and he's just waiting for Lee to attack. Now this is, if the Revolutionary War was a war where you had to get up close and personal with the bayonet, the Civil War is more of a shooting war, because the weapons were so much better. The rifles shot so much farther, so much more accurately. And people are starting to get smart on this now, and Lee and Hooker were no exception. Definitely not Lee, but Hooker either. He's going to sit back and let Lee attack him, wipe him out, and then swoop in for the finish. So he's confident. He thinks he's going to have this. One of the things that goes wrong for Hooker is that he sends his cavalry away. He sent his cavalry way down south in Virginia, totally off this map, maybe be like, down this area down here. Very far from the battlefield, just to raid enemy lines and raid behind enemy lines, I should say, and cause chaos. So when he's here on the battlefield, he's blind. He doesn't have good scouts out on horses that can come back and tell him where the enemy positions are and all that kind of thing that a good combat commander needs to have. So he's blind. Lee's not. Lee's not blind. Lee's got his cavalry there. He's got cavalry all over the place. And they come back and tell him that, the Union looks weak over here. It's pretty well forested. Now I'll draw some happy little trees in here, as Art Ross would say. Pretty well forested over here. Pretty well forested. A lot of these places. and we could maybe march around and come in behind and hit them on the other side, their right flank, essentially. So that's what Lee does. He divides his army again in the face of the enemy. So he gets Stonewall Jackson, who's legendary commander, and Stonewall Jackson marches all the way around here, largely unseen by the Union forces, and does a flank, what you would call a flanking move, hit them from the other side. A flanking move, and hits the Union forces over here where they really do not expect it at all. The Union does have some pickets out. Pickets would be like, you know, scouts or guys out front of the lines. Not many, not enough, not in strength, not very well run. So the Confederates come through. This is very thick vegetation. A lot of the trees, I think, were cut down at one point and used for firewood or log cabins or the other kind of stuff that they would make back then. So there's trees coming in, and it's a forest, but it's also got that real weedy, tangled undergrowth with brambles and thorns and everything like that. So it's extremely thick vegetation. It's a little bit tough to move through, especially if you're moving an army through with, like, you know, lines. They're trying to stay lined up and stuff. But the other thing about that is that it muffles the sound, and the Union didn't really know that the Confederates were creeping up on them. In fact, they didn't really know anything until they're literally sitting in their camp. They're sitting around campfires and stuff like that, and around their tents on, you know, stumps of logs or stools or whatever they had, and a bunch of deer and stuff like that start running past them. Something's wrong there. I mean, deer don't just come into your campsite and start running around. Deer run away from your campsite. So what's chasing the deer in? Well, it's a huge gray wall of Confederate troops coming in, led by Stonewall Jackson. So there's a quick battle here. The Union just run away. They just scamper out of there. And the whole rest of the day for the Union is spent just trying to not make this become a complete calamity whereby their army is completely smashed. A lot of these guys were actually German immigrants. They're from the upper Midwest and stuff like that. And they would be yelling in German, "All ist verloren, all is lost." So they're running in. And at the end of May 2nd, the Union's in big trouble. The only thing that stopped them from being completely routed was nightfall. Nightfall came, and that's really not the end of the story. On a really personal part of the story is that Stonewall Jackson, as a leader, always liked to go forward and do his own reconnaissance. He would do a leader's reconnaissance and get an idea for where his lines are and where the enemy was, what the terrain was like is it real hilly? Are there streams in there? What's that like? So he wants to always go out and do that. So he's riding between his main line of guys and between his pickets. His pickets are the scouts and stuff that are out front. And he and some other officers are riding back towards their lines. And in the dark, the Confederates think that Jackson is Union cavalry, and they blast him. They shoot him and a bunch of the other officers, and Jackson gets hit twice in the left arm. He's messed up very badly, and we've looked at how these weapons affect people and what the bullets do when they hit. He had to have his arm amputated. That's pretty standard. Bones were shattered, and it's just really nasty. So at the conclusion of the battle, May 3rd, there's another sort of smaller battle. The Union has to clear out, and they've basically lost the battle in total. So if you're looking at this kind of grid thing that I give you guys for the battles, but on the north you've got, General Hooker. Over on the south, this is be the part that you have to fill in. On the south, you've got Generals Jackson and General Lee. The combat strength for the north is 97,000. They had 97,000 guys attacking. The south only had 57,000. Casualties, the north suffered about 1,700 guys killed in action, 1,700 killed in action, and they had about 17,000 total casualties. So that would be killed, wounded, soldiers who were missing or captured. The South suffered about 1,700 killed in action, and they only had about 13,000 total casualties. And obviously it's a defeat for the North and a victory for the South. But Jackson's hit by this friendly fire, loses his arm. It's amputated by a surgeon. The rest of the war is going on without him, but he essentially has this, he's laid up in this little cottage. They put the best doctors over there to try and fix him up. He seems to be on the mend, at least in terms of the amputated arm, but he gets pneumonia. It's a lung ailment, essentially, and pretty much that's what gets him. Of course, getting your arm amputated obviously doesn't help, but the pneumonia, I think, was what really killed him. Hooker is going to get fired for this eventually. They don't fire him right away. Lincoln, later on that summer, gave him some orders that he didn't really want to follow, and Hooker protested, and then they just they just axed him. And the other thing that's a result of this battle, besides the Jackson death and Hooker being fired eventually, is Lee decides to invade the North. So he put his feelers out for that before at Antietam, or Sharpsburg, sometimes it's called if you're from the South. Didn't really win there, but now he's going to try it again. And because of this battle here at Chancellorsville, this sets up the Battle of Gettysburg. Battle of Gettysburg is Lee's big gamble to go north, and we'll look at that this week too. Okay, so that's going to be it for me. Thanks a lot. Try and keep up with your Civil War stuff for the week, and that'll be all. Bye-bye.